In this episode, we're discussing the emerging field of vendor advocacy, and we're going to explore whether there really is a need for vendors advocates, or is it just a money grab from some players in the real estate industry, which vendors might benefit the most from engaging a vendor's advisor, and what skills and experience should a vendor's advocate have to ensure that they're qualified to do the job.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Vendor advocacy is a term you may not have heard of before, but it's a service that's on the rise. A vendor's advocate is an advisor engaged by a person who is selling their property to help them choose a selling agent and navigate the selling process. Now, a kind of agent whisperer, if you will. It's on the rise partly because it's needed in many cases where vendors are at sea and need a trusted advisor on their side, but also because some industry participants have seen an opportunity to make some money. In this episode, Chris and I will tease out these two competing issues and help you determine whether you yourself may need a vendor's advocate sometime in the future or now. And if so, how do you go about choosing the right one?
It's going to be a great episode, this one, because, I think we're clocking up close to 400 episodes. We haven't covered this topic that much. I think we did one episode on it where we had a vendor advocacy that was working in Melbourne. And I do think it's an interesting service. I don't even think people know what it is, to be honest. Maybe that's where we should start. Let's just discuss what it is and how it works and why someone would even consider it.
Well, it's interesting because a little bit like buyer's agency, it's got this sort of wide spectrum of capability, but also service offering. And I first came across a vendor advisor, I should say, when I was filming the show Location Australia, and we were filming an episode down in Point Cook, a western suburb of Melbourne. And we were interested, we ended up buying this property for some people on the show, and it was being handled by a vendor's advocate. What that meant was that even though the agent was selling the property and we were dealing with the agent, we effectively negotiated directly with the vendor's advocate, and the vendor's advocate dealt with between us and the vendor. Now that's not the way I operate vendor's advocacy, and I'll explain that, I guess, a bit coming up. That's pretty extreme, and I was scratching my head at the time thinking, what the hell? Why would anybody do this? I mean, what's wrong with the sales agent? The sales agent's job is the job to negotiate. And so it was the first time I'd ever come across it. At that time, we're talking probably 12 years ago now, at that time, it turned out in Melbourne, it was quite common, much more common than I would have expected. I thought this is just a sort of a bit of a rogue operator that's managed to be the tapeworm of the real estate industry. That's sort of in a way what I was thinking is somebody just along for the ride, trying to take a cut of the commission. Now, in that particular scenario, the owners were in the middle of an acrimonious divorce. I think the vendor's advocate from memory had actually been appointed by the court. So it was like, it was a bit of a strange situation. You can have agents appointed by the court too, actually. But in this particular case, I think the vendor's advocate was appointed by the court. And in fact, the couple couldn't agree. And this advocate was sort of there meant to be, in a way, a mediator. And actually, a lot of agents really can't deal with that level of intensity of trying to mediate between warring, the War of the Roses, warring couples. So there are certainly some extreme circumstances where you can see where an additional party at play can potentially facilitate a deal and avoid or help them avoid detonating a really tricky situation already, right? So that was my first introduction to vendors advocacy. And then I thought nothing more of it for quite some time, to be honest. But then in my business, every now and then I'd be asked by somebody, look, you guys, used to be sales agents before you were buyer's agents, and I need a hand trying to work out how to get the best agent for my property, et cetera, et cetera. And So sometimes our clients, because they trusted us already and we were their trusted advisors, they would come to us asking for guidance. And look, I don't really know whether the agent's telling me the truth or anything. And I just want somebody to be there, effectively holding my hand and guiding me through this so that I don't screw up my own campaign. And so we started offering this service, and we used to charge fee for service originally. So we just said, okay, we charge you a fee. We break it down into 3 areas, which is choosing your agent, working out what the property's really worth, and then an advice line throughout the process. Then we found that, and so that we just offer that ad hoc. We didn't really bother packaging as a service per se. We certainly didn't market it. But then over the years, I've been doing so many strategy sessions with clients, and Chris, I know that you do a similar thing in your business where somebody comes to you and they're a new client and they want to buy a home or they want to upgrade their home or something. And you say, well, you know, what can you borrow? And they go to a broker and they come back with their borrowing capacity and then what can we buy? And I'm like, you can't actually get what you want, you know, for your budget. Like, what's your total property story? And it's like, they've got these investment properties, you know, often interstate. And they find that these properties were actually hamstringing their ability to effectively get on with their life plan that they wanted. They invested thinking that they are doing the right thing to build up their financial future, but they haven't really understood. And in many cases, other buyer's agents have been involved in these transactions too. But these buyer's agents are the type that want to set you up with a property portfolio plan. And it's all about acquisition of multiple properties, and there's no focus and no discussion often about what about your own home, you know. So a lot of these people have come to us, and often after maybe 10 years of having acquired a couple of properties, maybe 3 properties, and then not being able to actually have a home. And so we was trying to find, you know, agents in interstate and various places to help them get the best outcome of a sales campaign. And we just found that more and more we were getting involved with these advising people interstate. And we thought, you know what, we can actually put together the process that we'd formed in Sydney with our clients. We can put a framework around this and a process around this because we know the selling process. We know the things the ingredients need to be in place up front. We know if you don't get them wrong, halfway through a campaign, you might find yourself in damage control mode instead of actually in sales ramp up mode. We know all these things that need to be set up. So we started doing it, across the country. Anyway, so that's a sort of a short, story of how my personal involvement with Vendors Advisory has come about. But it's been fascinating, I have to say, getting involved in a number of transactions, and this is the other side of it, where people would call us midway through a transaction and say, or midway through a marketing campaign and say, my campaign's not going so well. This is what the agent's telling me. What should I do? And really realizing, wow, if we just wound it back a bit and known and actually made different decisions in the lead up, you wouldn't be in this situation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot involved. Selling a property is very complex. A lot of people just think it's all about just choosing an agent, but there's so much more to it. And that's why I thought it's a really interesting topic for an episode.
Well, absolutely. So I think it's a professional, usually a buyer's agent, right, that plays in this role, that acts for you as the seller, who knows the local market, or knows how to pick a good agent in a local area, knows the right things to judge a good agent on. And then they help you pick the best agent. So they'll do a process where they'll interview a number of agents in the area. They'll understand their selling processes and, how they price property and what their fees are and, their experience in similar properties, etc. So they help you select the agent. They'll help you negotiate the cost of that agent. Now, do you pay a fee for the vendor advocate or do they get that fee from the agents? And would every agent work with you if you're taking some of their lunch?
That's such a good question. And as I mentioned earlier, I started fee for service and I fully believe in fee for service. But I tell you what, most of the people that do Vendors Advisory work don't charge fee for service. They charge a percentage of the sales commission. And I know that that's sort of counterintuitive because we are trying to negotiate the best fee, and yet if our fee is a percentage of that, then what's our incentive to negotiate the best fee? It's inherently fraught. However, I have recognised that that's the way the industry likes to behave, and that is the way consumers tend to want to deal in real estate. That is, they like to pay at the end of it all. They don't like to pay up front. So, and they're not keen on paying for advice very much and outside the buyer's agency space. So I've resigned myself to have a fee model that fits the market rather than what I actually think is ethically the better way of doing it, and also my preferred way of doing it. So I've resigned myself to do a fee split with the agent. We also do charge a small upfront fee as well for consultation. And the reason we do, that's $990, right? The reason we do that is because when you're dealing with a sales agent whose fee is totally and utterly contingent on you selling, that means all of their advice is going to be skewed towards A, you selling, B, you selling now, and C, you selling with them, right? What we want to do before we even get to talking to agents is make sure that we've charged a consultancy fee, $990, to actually get a proper consultation up front as to, is the property in a saleable state? If not, what needs to be done? And that's particularly important if there's tenants in place as well. And that can often take some time to work through with the property manager. If you need to vacate a tenant, or if you need to work with the tenant in any way, whether it's getting partially styled, whatever it is, however you're negotiating with that tenant, that takes time. And you need somebody who's really focused on good advice rather than getting you to sell at all costs. The second thing is around the timing. It might, every market has got certain seasonal elements, and there's also certain market behaviours, and there's certain types of properties that you need to pick certain markets to sell in, and that advice needs to be given impartially. So as opposed to a sales agent where if you ask them when's a good time to sell, it is always now, but the market's not good. It's going to get worse. The market's fantastic and it's climbing. Yeah, but it's going to peak, and when it peaks, it will drop fast. You know what I mean? It's all that sort of stuff. So if you are not getting some advice in whether you should sell, and if you should sell, what needs to happen before you're ready to sell, and whether you get the timing right and all that sort of stuff, and also your price expectation, if you're not really truly ready to meet the market, then our advice would be don't sell or don't sell now. And you need to have independent advice on that, expert advice. So that's why we do charge a small upfront fee, but the rest of it is taken out of the sales commission. And so there are some agents, we've interviewed some actually on the podcast, you might recall, Chris, who say that they refuse to deal with vendors.
That was one of my questions, actually. Yeah, that was interesting.
And the reality is we haven't had anybody refuse to deal with us, and that's mainly because we're not the type of vendors advocate that they refuse to deal with, right? What they're refusing to deal with are these vendors advocates that become gatekeepers, a bit like the first one I ever dealt with. Like, that's, from a sales agent's point of view, that's a really difficult relationship to manage when you actually don't have direct access to the vendors, and you're not even negotiating the deal. Like, you don't, a sales agent, you find a good agent, they need to control the process. They need to run that campaign. We can be there as their guides as well as the client's guides. And we're a sounding board. We're experienced sales agents before we were buyer's agents, right? So we're a sounding board for both sides of the equation. You got these buyer's agents that want to clip a ticket, and they don't know anything about selling property, and they get in the way. They get in the way of deals. They complicate things. They stuff up deals, and they don't ensure that the vendor has got clear information and making really good decisions. That's why, and I would refuse to deal with those types of those types of vendors agents too, when I was a sales agent, if the service existed back then, right? So we don't find any pushback. Now, there are some vendors advocates in Victoria, for instance, in Melbourne. Some of them will charge up to 50% of the fee.
Wow,
now, that's not tolerated anywhere other than in Melbourne, really. And even that, I think, is pushing it. I think that any vendor's advocate that charges that amount is really one of those very highly engaged, is almost doing half the sales job, right? Yeah. And I don't think that is a right way to do it. I think you've got to let the sales agent, if you've chosen a good one, do their job, right? So what is standard can be, depending on where you are, sort of really anywhere between 20 and 30% of the sales commission. That is sort of a standard range that people might charge. And you'll find, actually, I've talked to buyers agents in Brisbane, Victoria and Sydney that are doing it. So it is certainly a growing field.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So you're paying about, you're saying the same amount of sales commission that you would usually with selling. You still negotiate there, and the agent's still happy to give 20% of their lunch away because ultimately you brought a customer to them. And so there's the marketing benefit. They don't want their competitors to get the listing. So they still stay competitive, because if they weren't competitive, then their competitors would get the listing, right? So that's part of your decision making. Not that you do it all on price, which is my next question. And then you're there really to be probably the BS meter, right? So when you're picking the agent, like who's the right agent to pick, but once you've signed up is to know that they're doing all the things that they should be doing to get this property ready for campaign. They've thought it through. They're not just rushing the listing. They've priced it well. They haven't, and what they're saying makes sense. And, I guess early in a campaign, you can very quickly know, make corrections if, by getting their feedback. Whereas, the average punter on the street really doesn't know what the agent's saying is true or not, and doesn't really know how to manage them until they're 3-4 weeks deep into a campaign, which is, getting costly, it's getting stressful, and particularly if they've already bought something else and they're doing an upgrade or something, it could be really costly. And so do you think that that's when you break it down, where you get the most value? Yes, selecting the agent's right, but after you've selected the agent, do you think the best vendor advocacy is actually making sure that campaign stays on track and it gets the love it deserves?
Yeah, and it's also about setting the owner's expectation, particularly on price, right at the outset. Now, everybody wants the most amount of money. We know that. But we also know that when owners want too much for their property, and they also get into control freak mode and they start controlling how the agent can quote it and how they can pitch it and all the rest of it, those sorts of owners shoot themselves in the foot, because they're trying to control the market, they're trying to control the agent, trying to control the campaign. They're not actually letting the market reveal itself to them in terms of what the market's prepared to pay for that property. Now, obviously in competitive markets, that's really important. If you're not in a competitive market, it's a different strategy that you need to employ. But regardless, where a lot of owners get it wrong is that their expectations at the outset are misaligned or malaligned with the market, and that's sometimes a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. But to make informed decisions about whether you're going to sell a property or not, you really do need to understand that if you don't get the competition that you really want, this is the sort of price it's realistic to expect. And are you prepared to accept that? Does that help you move on to whatever you want to do next, or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, does that mean that you really shouldn't be selling this property? And this is really important, because sales agents are taught not to condition the vendor before they get the listing. So you're not going to get that guidance from sales agents before you sign it on the dotted line, because they know that other agents are probably, inflating your expectations a bit. They all run this really, really delicate line between competing with other agents for your business and flattering you to go with them, but at the same time not shooting themselves in the foot and trying to set themselves up for a really, tough campaign because the vendor's out of control on price. This is a balance that every agent needs to play. And because they're playing that game, they're not giving you the truth. And you can't really make proper decisions about whether to sell, when to sell, why you're selling. Does selling help you achieve what you achieve if you're not getting good advice on that? So we're really, really focused on that particular aspect as well, because I've seen so many times when people really are not prepared to meet the market. They end up, push comes to shove, having to accept it, grudgingly sometimes, because it's the whole sunk cost thing. Once you've signed an agency agreement, there you are. You're in the vortex. It's all happening, right? It's harder to back out. And so, this is very, very important to have this stuff up front. And we also find that, most people don't, salespeople are very good at pitching themselves. So it's really quite difficult for someone to sit there and sort of pull apart which of these things that they're pitching to me really matter, which of them are really going to make a difference in my sale versus which of them it's just hot air. It's never going to matter, So these things count. And this is where a good vendor's agent, vendor's advocate, who understands the selling process because they've been there, so never, ever, ever go with one who hasn't been a sales agent themselves. They are going to help guide you through that and give you insights through that whole process.
Is there any like deal breakers that you go through when you're initially picking the agent? Is there any things that you just really think that's just a major deal breaker?
Yeah, it's funny. I think about some of the properties, we've got our favourite agents, if you like, in our core market. And we know them well. And I'll give you one example, a woman actually that we've referred to a few of our vendor advisory clients, and she's done a fantastic job. And in fact, one property I sold some time ago, she sold for me and did an amazing job. And we brought her into present in a listing which was the next suburb along. So it's just one suburb away. She wasn't actually the key person there, but this particular market is dominated by one particular agent. And I assumed, because I've known this other dominant agent for a long time and I've experienced sort of the behaviour firsthand, and I thought this person's going to be a bit of a bully. It's going to sort of behave like they own the market, and I need to find some other really strong agents that are from peripheral markets that can potentially come and be a credible alternative. And one of those was this woman that I personally use and I think is fantastic. I still do think she's fantastic, but she was not fantastic in this situation. She was unprepared. She put too ambitious a price on the property. She didn't really back that up with really good comparables and good reasoning, good evidence. Whereas the bully, who I thought was a bully, he absolutely blew us away. And this is what I love about being wrong. I love about being wrong when I learn something, right? He came super well prepared. He has never taken his market dominance for granted. And I think that was something was really commendable. I was really, really impressed, and it wasn't what I expected. And so in that particular case, yes, my favourite agent, now I wasn't doing the vendor advisory, I'm in the wings, we talk about all these in the office. My favourite candidate actually shot herself in the foot by being completely unprepared and poorly managing the owner's expectations at the outset. Now that's actually bad, because that's really difficult to backpedal from and get into a really good position to launch a campaign and get it off on the right footing. And so that for me is a deal breaker. If someone is lazy or a bit slack or a bit busy that day and just didn't give it the attention it was that it was due, definite deal breaker. And in fact, trying to get agents to do appraisals is really interesting. New South Wales is legislated, Victoria's legislated too. I haven't checked the legislation around the country, but I'm pretty certain there's similar legislation in every jurisdiction that the selling agent must show evidence to support their their sales expectation figure, right? And yet I find it very, very difficult to get them to do that. And so we have a pro forma we give them to say, well, this is our expectation of you. We want you plucking a figure out of the air, say it should get such and such. Or we want you to show us your reasoning. And in that, we can get insights into really, I guess, how well they know their market as well. And whether they're able to actually back up what they say or whether they're just going to wing it, and that's something. I don't want agents that wing it.
Yeah. Do you think it's that real market knowledge where they, don't pluck that number? They're a bit hesitant to pluck that number, and they hold it back. It's a little bit like us when we're giving advice. We don't jump to conclusions. We have to think about it. We have to ask them multiple questions. We have to consider different alternatives. We have to think about different trade-offs. And sometimes people just want to know the answer. And it's like, well, I just need to get some more questions in my head to formulate that answer. And only then, when you actually give some advice, you actually know that it's in someone's interest because you've thought about it all and deeply. And I can remember a few different agents coming through a place of ours a couple of years ago, and one probably rushed you'll get X amount. And there wasn't really much thought to it, to be honest. The other one, really brought up a bunch of sales in my kitchen and debated it and said, look, I sold that one, and that one was, it got a good price, but it wasn't that hot. And we got a bit lucky with that one. And it's all those stories to prices, particularly that, who know. And actually, I didn't sell that one, but I know that one sold really strongly and it's similar to that and it's better than that. And that as a seller, even though we decided not to sell, but was really comforting. And so I imagine if you're as a buyer's agent, what's that agent that can sit and debate the value of it and be transparent in how they go about it? It's really valuable. Is there any negatives though? Like when you think, obviously picking the wrong vendor's advocate, like picking the wrong buyer's agent, if I'm completely honest, I think a poor buyer's agent is A, you got to pay for it, and B, I reckon they're not helping you. They're actually making it harder to you to buy. And
you buy a worse asset than you would have bought without them, or you pay more than you wouldn't pay without them. That's
absolutely,
really bad. But
because you actually get like accountability to the buyer's agent. You sometimes forget, hey, what I'm trying to achieve is the right property, but because I've got this relationship and I'm getting forced to buy because they want to get them off their books, you end up starting acting emotionally and try to manage the relationship with the buyer's agent, but you completely forget that what you're trying to achieve here is to buy a home. It's more about the relationship with the buyer's agent. I've seen that go wrong. But I imagine that's the same case with vendors. Besides picking a bad one who hasn't really got a great skill set there, is there any negative in your mind to picking a vendor's advocate?
Look, I think there are definitely. I mean, the reality is, and it's funny too, because sometimes we get approached by clients who say, look, I've already had 3 agents through, so I've sort of gone down the path. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're confident that, that your choice of one of those, you're confident in knowing how you're going to anticipate the whole program and knowing how you're going to demand of them and hold them accountable and the rest of it, and you're confident they're good agents, then you sort of don't need a vendor's advocate. And we don't want to muscle in just to try and get a cut. I think that's something that sales agents really hate. They see that, look, I've already got this, we've already done the appraisals, don't muscle in.
Okay.
There are times, and I will offer to, clients that call me after they've already had the agents in, and I'll say, well, if there's any doubt in your mind about how you're going to manage the whole process, then yeah, we can get involved, and I know we can add value, and I know that we can sort of keep you on track and them on track, and you can be then confident that they're doing everything, and then when you get an offer, even if it's not as much as you really wanted, you don't blow that offer, because we're going to make sure that everything has been done around that offer to make sure that that person pays the most, I'll probably pay, but also whether or not there's any other buyers there that really should be included in the mix, and the timing of that, and we can really guide through all of that. But some clients are like, some sellers are like, nah, I got this. So I wouldn't muscle in on a deal like that and try to just clip the ticket. I'll be like, I'll let that go. I don't need to be involved in something like that. So I think if you've got someone, a vendor's advocate, that's trying to muscle their way into a deal that's you've almost decided and you're comfortable and you're really happy with that, then you don't need a vendor's advocate. You just go ahead with where you've already on the path you're already on. But we find a lot of people, they inherently don't trust agents, or they're on their own. One of our clients is going through divorce, and she's like, I actually didn't foresee that I would really appreciate the support, even just sitting through the appraisals with me, and then to be able to debrief with somebody, and then to be really clear on the direction I'm going. She said after the event, that was a benefit I really didn't anticipate. And so, there's somebody who really would benefit from having a trusted advisor on their side, someone who's going through a tough time or is just unfamiliar with dealing with agents, and values that sounding board.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. And you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you'll find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program, access to suburb help for investors, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers.
If you're thinking about buying your first home, upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
Let me tell you a story about this is one of the examples which really caused us as a business to put more focus on providing vendor advocacy as a service, right? So this was a client of ours who rang Rachel in my team, and he bought a number of investment properties from us over the years and his own home. And prior to coming on board with us, he'd bought investment properties with another buyer's agent. And one of those properties in the Northern Beaches he had on the market, and it was the late last year. the agent had told him, going off memory here, but the agent had told him to expect around about 4 million. And so he'd put it to market with the agent that was managing the property. So it had been rented out. He'd just gone with the sales, or the principal of the business actually. And they said 4 million, and so they put it to market. They did a pre-market open. They had a buyer's agent come through who said to them, "Oh yeah, 4 million. I reckon you get that every day." And so they went back to the vendor, our client, who was not our client at the time, saying, "Yeah, got really good feedback around 4 million. I reckon we should take it to auction. I reckon we should put on the market." And that's where we're going to go for. Now, he got an offer in that process of 3.7. I think they quoted 3.7 from memory. He got an offer at 3.7, which he didn't take because he said, "Well, you tell me I'm going to get 4 every day of the week. So that's cool. That's good. That's a good starting point." There was no guidance or advice around that offer. So, let it go without thinking too much about it.
Yeah.
And comes to the auction, and he's a week out from auction. He rings Rachel in my team and says, "Tell me what's gone wrong here." So what's actually happened by that time that finally they got another offer, 3.3 this time, and the agent's trying to bully the owner into selling 3.3. So you got to remember, he's told him he's going to get 4 million every day of the week. He's had an offer of 3.7, which he didn't really work very hard and let go. And then the next offer over time is 3.3. The auction's coming up in a few days. And he says, "You got to take this. You got to take this. Look what's happening in the market. I thought it was worth 4. Then you got an offer of 3.7. It's falling like a knife. This is terrible. The next offer is going to be 3. So you get all these heavy-handed tactics, right? He calls us and Rachel says, "We do offer a vendor advocacy, in case you didn't know." "Well, I didn't know. And can you give me some advice?" So we charged him a fee. We went along, had a look at the property. We actually did an assessment ourselves on the price, and we thought, you know what, in the current market where it's sitting, 3.5 is fair value. Really, the 3.3 pushing him to sell at that is really wrong. But probably 3.5 is around where it sits. We spoke to the agent. We got the background. He had 3 buyers potentially on it that he thought would be at auction. He hadn't really worked in the other 2. He hadn't pushed the 3.3 buy for anything more. And we said, you know what, run it to auction and just see if there's anything more there, and then have a set figure, reserve in your own head that you will not budge off. And our plan is, if you don't get that, you take it off the market. We wait till after Christmas. We get a new agent. And there were things in the presentation we could see that had not been maximised in terms of the way the property was presented. We'll do this to it, and then we'll relaunch it. So this all happened. We go to the auction, and there were 3 registered bidders, one of whom made an offer, and it was less than 3.3. And we were there representing the client. The client wasn't there. The agent, it turns out this sales agent, he actually sold these other people's house. So the buyer that had offered the 3.3, he'd sold their house. So he should have had a really good relationship with them. He should have been able to really talk to them about where this property was worth and absolutely. There should have been a really much better dialogue with that. And I watched him at the auction. He was talking to them. It was like they were total strangers.
Well,
He had sold their house, but he'd never built a rapport with them. I don't know how you even do that, to be quite frank. He hadn't built a rapport with them. He didn't have the right to ask them for more money. So he hadn't earned the right in his relationship as a buyer nor as a seller with these people. And we could just see no deal was getting done this day. So sure enough, passes it in. Wait over the Christmas period. We get the bits and pieces done to a bit of painting, a bit of presentation, a bit of different gardening, whatever. And so we find a better agent, bring it back to the market in the new year. 2 of those buyers came back through. Right? They were actually at the auction, and there were new buyers as well. So they were still interested, and he didn't even work them, and then ultimately it sells at auction for 3.65. So that's a good example of where vendor advisory in the middle of a campaign that is going so wrong, because the owner did not know. He just did not know, well, is 3.3 it or not? He didn't trust the agent. That agent had scored no brownie points with him, was bullying him. If that guy had to sell, you can imagine what would happen. Every now and then you see a
absolutely.
bargain in a suburb. That's the sort of scenario that leads to a bargain.
Absolutely, and most people have to sell right now. I think it's the tightness in borrowing capacity. Very few people are able to keep their first home and upgrade into another property. Even we've had a few clients that could, and they've been able to buy without using bridging, without having to sell. So they've been in a very fortunate position where they've had enough borrowing capacity to upgrade and keep their current home, but they've decided to still sell. That additional debt, rather than paying off their first home, and rather than saying, I'm going to gamble a little bit and try to sell my current home in a year or 2 or 3 years' time, they're still selling. So, whereas in other markets when there's a real, rates are cheap and prices are rising, a lot of people still keep their current home just to get the maximum value. And so it's interesting. A lot of people are having to sell and upgrade or and want to buy something at a similar price point than what they're actually spending. They've got today. That's a real change I've seen in the last 6 months, where upgraders are spending very similar to what they've got. They're just making different compromises, whether it's location or style of place. And so, but what they're doing, and we were talking together as a team today, is they're finding it really hard to find something. And they're okay because they're in the market and they're not too concerned about that, but they're absolutely looking. And they're trying to a bit of an opportunistic, and they're trying to buy at a long settlement and sell on a short. And that's, I think, a prime time where you need a great vendor advocate by your side, because your margin for error is really small. And if you do buy, another time I can think client last year, it was actually in family, I'll be completely frank, who was selling a grandparent's property, and 2 kids, but probably don't get along as well as they should, of that grandparent, were having to sell the grandma's property, and was their mum's property. And a vendor advocate had played a key role in that. A, picking the agent. B, just being that source of truth in the middle, a mediator in the middle, which I thought it would be a bit of a nightmare to get that property sold. And it actually sold, and it sold for a fair price. I mean, it probably would have still sold for that, but just getting that decision done and not derailing it, not either party self-sabotaging it. And so I can see that would happen. And and also there's just so many behavioural bias. Like when you said there about the sounding board around selling, it's exactly the same thing when you're working with a buyer's agent. Like you get to this point, and I've done this multiple times myself, and you're at the mercy of the market, right? Whenever you're buying or selling, right? And so you got this ideal world, and you got this real reality that you're in, and you're searching, and you're going to open homes, and you're comparing every single property on the market, and nothing's exactly right. And you're comparing this property versus that property, and you try to buy for your future life, which you actually don't know what you're going to need as your kids get bigger, or but when you have kids, or even what you're going to like in 5 years' time, you actually don't know. And you're emotional, and usually you're upgrading, and you're making these big lifestyles, not when you've got complete clear-headedness. It's usually when work's busy, family life's busy. And that sounding board, I don't think can be understated. And I think a great buyer's agent doesn't rush you to a decision. They don't rush your decision the moment you see a property. Like there's no way, as you first see a property, you should be saying to them, I really want to go for it. Like, how many times when you sleep on it, you wake up the next day and you're like, what was I thinking? So a great buyer's agent, A, encourages you to sleep on it. B, makes you look at it a few times if you can, and really debates it with you. Like, what is the negative of this property? Like, doesn't just think about the positives, and challenges you that you're just really aware of the compromise you're making, and comparing it to other properties. And that can be the thing that forces you to actually go and make an offer, because a lot of people sit on the fence and they don't give it the time it deserves. And all of a sudden there's an offer, and then you rush your decision, or you don't get your DD ready when you should be because you said you really liked it because you were busy at work, etc. So I find that's a really valuable thing. So it's kind of like a reverse when you're selling.
Yep.
When you're on the market and you've got an offer and the open home's not going very well, what tweaks can you make to the campaign? Should you listen to the agent? Is the agent really telling you the truth? Should you take that offer? Potentially, if you were in that vendor's advisory and they said 3.7, you could have said, look, that's a good offer. Like, he hasn't really got anyone else. He's done 2 opens. You probably would have given him that advice. And that would have, maybe essentially got him 50 grand more and all the hassle of waiting 6 months. And so, yeah, that sounding board thing, I imagine, is a really big thing.
Yeah, that is the thing, because quite often the feedback, and we know this to be true, that people don't know what to believe from the agent. They feel like they know that the agent wants to get the property sold, and so often they feel that they're being pressured by the agent to sell. And they often can't recognise what's a good deal, what they should be selling for, and which buyer they should be selling to and which not. Also, what's a good offer? How concrete is that offer? So we're able to sort of push back with the agent a bit to go, okay, well, before we seriously consider this as an offer, we need to really know, is it a serious offer? What else has this person done to show us how committed they are to the property? And where are the other buyers? Is this person head and tails above the other buyers, or are the other buyers all pretty much close together, in which case you go to auction or whatever the process is. The thing is that often the agent a good agent will be doing all this stuff, and obviously what we're looking for are good agents, right, to do this. And so we know that, and we can just have a bit of a professional dialogue with them because we're speaking the same language, and we can go, right, we get the picture, we understand, and we can make suggestions and all the rest of it. And so it's like, okay. And then we talk to the client and we're able to interpret that for them, because this is a problem that if they don't necessarily instinctively trust the agent, because they often don't. I mean, people fundamentally don't. Maybe afterwards they will, when it sort of dust has settled, and they go, yeah, actually that was a good deal. But in the heat of it, they're thinking, I don't know if this is the best offer I can get. So having that guidance is really important, because if you do pass on it, it can cost you. And often you don't know, you've got no parallel universe. So you don't have the benefit of hindsight at the time when you're going through all this stuff. But I think, too, the other thing that you talk about, when you have to sell as well, often owners, and I know this from when I was a sales agent, a lot of people, the more pressure they're under, often the worse decisions they make. So I'm talking about owners here, and they don't want to let the agent know that they have to sell. The amount of people that had said to me on the morning of auction, I just need to let you know I have to sell today. And you're thinking, oh, my God, if I had known that, you've been pushing me this whole time. You've been telling me you won't accept less than X. You've been telling me you can always rent it out. You've been telling me all the normal things that owners tell me, and I'd be saying, what if someone came in with Y? Nah, I wouldn't sell for that. I'll only sell for X or more. And so when you give the agent that sort of dialogue, and a lot of owners do, they think that's the way to manage an agent. And then on the day of the auction, they fess up that actually all that stuff I've been telling you is bullshit, and I really need to sell. The agent's got nothing to work with. The amount of times that has happened to me when I was a sales agent, I've been, oh my God, I would have had, if I could have adjusted the guide, and not been pitching it so high because you kept insisting, if I was able to work with that buyer that you told me, no, you wouldn't entertain that offer, whatever, all these things that could have led me to have more people there to compete with each other for your benefit, and you will definitely sell. It might not be quite at the level that you wanted, but you will definitely get a buyer, as opposed to, oh, it's shaky. I really don't have the depth of buyer pools here. So it's that sort of thing that we're owners who are trying to make sure that they protect themselves, but often undermine their own sale. And that's where, if you've got a really good vendor's advocate in place that you trust, that can interpret, it's like the agent whisperer, if you like, the truth tellers. We're digging into agent psychology and buyer psychology and all that sort of stuff. If you've got someone that's skilled like that, you will be able to get the outcome you need. And I think that that's something that's really, really important. And when it doesn't happen, and it could have happened, that's a real tragedy.
Yeah, I just reflect on, and even my sister, actually, we're trying to say we didn't use a vendor advocate and a place in Melbourne that she's got. And I was sort of playing the role there a little bit, trying to, from my opinion, and I regretted it. And that's why, in terms of family, on the next one, I absolutely used a vendor advocate because it was selecting the agent, and we just didn't know what to do to to manage this. We ended up not selling. She still got the asset, right? But, you know, and it was just all going wrong. And like you said, we're getting offers below, etc. And I think that's a huge value, is just knowing what not to do and what to do, what's the step to bounce it. Because just like buying, you know, even if you know what you think you know around buying, the emotion takes over.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm like the worst buyer. I'm too friendly with the agents. I don't really, you know, focus. I probably don't ask the right questions. I overtell information. I'm just the buyer's agent, you know. I'm watching the TV show at the moment, Winning Time, and it's when the two caller tells his mate to stop calling, he just closes his fist. That's what the buyer's agents do to me. He's like, close your mouth, mate. You're screwing us up here.
Love it.
You're saying things that I can't unwind. But yeah, I think that's the other problem is that with agents is they absolutely will, you know, like any sales role, and is that when you do need to take action, they know those things that will be able to motivate you to accept the offer. And end of the day, in markets like now, agents absolutely can play the long trusted advisor game. Yep, they will, but they still need runs on the board, and they still want to get sales through. And it's a really hard market, I think, at the moment because they are doing a lot of work where people are putting it on the market. They're doing a lot more open homes. Not saying this they shouldn't be, but then vendors are saying, hang on a sec, I'm not selling because I can't get the price I want. And so I think you just got to be also careful with, you know, agents change in different markets, I imagine. And you just need to know that sometimes they're acting out of the wrong emotions, and you need to be able to identify that and have those conversations with them. And not that they're being bad people, it's just that they do get affected, I believe.
Well, you got to think it's how they're remunerated. They're rewarded based on how they're remunerated. They're remunerated, it's contingent. They only get paid if you sell. And because that's the case, of course, they are not ever going to advise you not to sell if that's in your best interest, because it's not in their best interest. You know, so, and likewise, when they're trying to win your business, you know, that if they miss out, right, that other agent's the one driving the Maserati, not them. But not only that, you won't know that you made a bad decision until after the cooling off period's applied on a pass on a agency agreement. So, for example, in New South Wales, you get I think it's 48 hours. I can't remember now. I'm pretty certain it's 48-hour cooling off period on an agency agreement, right? So, but nothing's happened in that 48 hours. Like, you don't know. It's like 2 weeks into the campaign when you're going, oh, pick the wrong agent because everything's gone wrong and you're not getting the information you want, and you really don't. All of a sudden, they're telling you all the negatives about the property that they could have told you before. It's like when, you know, you get this complaint from owners all the time. Why? I mean, it was always on a busy road. Why are they suddenly telling me it's a busy road? Like, I don't know that, you know, or it was never renovated or never had parking. Why are they going on about it now? And it's like, one of the things that we ask the agent is, what's going to make it difficult to sell it? Because a lot of properties do have something that's wrong with them. You know, being C-grade properties have got things that are wrong with them. What's going to make it difficult to sell? Now, if that agent won't honestly answer that, then they're not going to answer that property. They're not going to answer that question before you sign the agency agreement, because they don't want to put negativity in your mind. But the reality is you need to know they know, because you need to know that they know how to handle those objections, et cetera, et cetera. And also you need to know that they recognise that because it might be a tough property to sell in a certain market, et cetera. There's all this sort of insight you get from an agent that will actually be honest with you about your property before you sign, but they won't, because you won't sign. You'll go with the agent that believes in your property, and then all of a sudden they're giving you all these reasons why buyers won't pay you the money you want. And it's too late by the time you get to that point, because your what do you call it? Your cooling off period has expired, you know. So you can't turn around and go, I don't want to be with this agent anymore, you know. But it happens all the time. I'm telling you, it happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And your sunk costs, you're in there, and, you know, you probably should have asked those questions at that initial appraisal. I mean, I do like to, you know, have a bit of a joke when I do go to open homes and some things negative, and, you know, oh, the driveway's a bit steep. Oh, it's and you know what? Listening to their replies, you know, the creative replies that they come up to, the negatives, it is quite amusing. And that's what I've joked around with agents coming to the place before. And, talked about the negatives. How are you going to handle that? Like, that's a key negative. This is dark. And it's
struggle.
Yeah. What are you going to do? If you can't sell it in summer, how do you handle that? Like, and so I think it's what do you do if the place smells? We'll put some candles in, you know what I mean? Or if it's noisy, we'll put the music on. And like, I think that's another thing, is that when you're going around properties and there's a negative, you turn the lights off, or you turn the radio down, or and you can do that when other buyers are there. I've done that before, which is a bit funny.
You're pissed, aren't you?
Yeah,
but here's the thing, though. If that agent knows these things, they know that they're a problem, then they shouldn't be suggesting you sell in winter. And yet I still see a lot of agents who are not game to say wait. They're not game to say don't sell in December, wait till February. They're not game because it's a scarcity mindset. They're worried they're not going to get their listing. Now, look, just wrap it up. But for optimum results, if you're going to choose a vendor's agent, you want to get somebody who actually has got a lot of sales experience themselves before they become buyer's agent, or they're just a specialist vendor's advocate who has moved from being in a sales agent role. Do not go with one that's never been in a selling role. It's just folly. And, for optimum results, you need to choose the right sales agent. Plus, you have to get the timing right. You have to get the messaging and the pitch of your property right, the price guide right, the method of sale right, because otherwise you won't know you're on the wrong track until you're halfway through a campaign. And that's really, and then by the time you realize that, you're in damage control. You're not actually moving forward to getting everything set up to get the best possible result for yourself. So I would say that I'd encourage you to reach out to my business if you are thinking about selling a property and you'd like some vendor advisory advice or advocacy, because it is one shot. You get one shot to get it right, is what I can say when you're selling a property. And it might not be right for you to sell. In fact, we just had one client come to me and we worked out it's better that they kept it. And so they're going to keep it. And imagine if they sold. That's it, gone. Never get back into that market, So it's really important to get good advice.
Absolutely. Enjoyed the chat as always, Veronica, and look forward to that one. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.